I'm very happy to be here, and I'm hoping that in 15 minutes I will be able to give you some information on FDA submissions. So today we'll talk a little bit about the types of regulated products, the types of submissions. I will give you some practical regulatory approaches, some strategies for strong submissions, and some do's and don'ts. And I fully realize I'm between you and your lunch, so I'll try not to get you too bored. And I hope everyone has a cup of their favorite beverage to keep them awake next 15-20 minutes. So where does FDA draw its statutory authority? Maybe some of you have heard, but maybe not. There's a Food, Drug, and Cosmetic Act that was passed many months ago. And then in order for it to be implemented, the regulators have created the Code of Federal Regulations. And in Chapter 21 is essentially all we need to know about how FDA-regulated products are actually, how the oversight is implemented. And there's 6 broad categories of regulated products. Drugs are, your chemically synthesized, very well characterized small molecules, such as prescription drugs and over-the-counter drugs. Biologics are derived from living materials, such as human, animal, or microorganism cells. They're usually very complex in structure and not well characterized even at the time of submission. And those are your gene therapies, vaccines, surfactants, antibodies, blood and blood deliverables, etc. And then you also have medical devices, which are articles that diagnose, cure, mitigate, treat, or prevent diseases. And they affect human structures within the body. They don't cause any chemical changes within the body. So that's the difference between devices and drugs. And those are your hip implants, stents, even Band-Aids are medical devices, valves, neurostimulating leads, in vitro diagnostics, and a lot, but of course not all medical apps. Now, these are the main categories that we will discuss later today, but there's another 3 products that are under FDA purview, and those are tobacco products. So pretty much any product that contains a tobacco is or nicotine is regulated by FDA. So e-cigarettes, cigarettes, nicotine products such as patches and gums, etc. All supplements are under FDA regulation, though of course they're not as strictly regulated as drugs, biologics, and devices. And those are vitamins, minerals, herbal products, etc. And then not to forget cosmetics, as cosmetics were included in the original Food, Drug, and Cosmetic Act. And so FDA regulates pretty much everything that's a cosmetic product: sunscreens, lipsticks, hair dyes, nail polish, and so on. And we're not going to talk about submissions that include these 3 categories today. So the types of submissions that you will encounter either as an investigator or as a company are investigational products. So you cannot conduct a clinical study within the US without filing for an investigational product, study of some description. And so investigational products do need to be filed, and it could be either a completely new product that you have conceived and you want to do a clinical study, or it could be an approved product that you want to study for an unapproved indication. And then, of course, there's marketing submissions that allow you to commercialize the product. So even within each of these broad categories, there's further subdivision. So for investigational drugs, we file what's called an investigational new drug submission. And biologics need to go through pretty much the same submission process, an IND. And remember how I said everything you need to know is in 21 CFR. Well, in 21 CFR, Part 312 is where you find the IND regulations. And then for medical devices, we file what's called an investigational device exemption, or an IDE, and the regulations are found in 21 CFR 812. Now, in terms of marketing submissions, again, for those three key product groups, we file what's called a new drug application for drugs, and a BLA, or a biological license application for biologics. And then once you get to medical devices, it becomes a little more complex, in that medical device submissions for marketing are risk-based. So the highest class from a risk perspective is class 3, for which we file pre-market approval applications, or PMAs. For class 2 devices, there are two types of applications. De novo application is filed when you have a completely new, novel, groundbreaking device for which there is no similar device on the market. Now, if there is a similar device on the market, if you can somehow draw a comparison to a marketed medical device, you could go the route of a 510K notification, and there you choose a predicate or a few, and you draw a comparison and prove substantial equivalence as part of it. So I'd like to give you some practical regulatory approaches, and this is this is how I view, and this is how most of industry views product development. You have an idea, and the first thing is put together a good strategy. And it could be a business strategy, regulatory strategy, or all of the above, testing strategy. And then you design and develop your product, you test it, you do, some prototypes, et cetera, et cetera. And at some point you find yourself needing to do a submission. So submission stage is an important, but not the first part of product development. And today I will only focus on submissions. There's not enough time in 15 minutes to cover the other first stages. So a couple of strategies for strong submissions is, before you do an investigational product or a marketing submissions, I always recommend meet with the agency. Of course, that is a submission on it in its own, and the principles that I will show you later would apply to that submission as well. But for investigational or marketing submission, meet with the FDA before, explain the information clearly. Don't assume that FDA knows it. Don't try to hide any details, and certainly don't cherry pick your data. And then be honest in the conclusions. A lot of times we see weird things happening in preclinical studies. Just be honest, acknowledge them, and try to explain them and move on. So submissions, do's and don'ts. What I recommend is follow the most current guidances in your area. They are publicly available on FDA's website. Also, a resource on FDA's website is current competitors' clearances or approvals. They're sometimes redacted, but you can certainly use them as a resource. Use checklists to be sure that you're not missing any required elements in your submission. Allow time, and 4 and 5 are really important. Allow time to do your proper formatting, do a consistency check, QC your submission against the raw data, and at the end, double check your electronic submission. These days, we only do electronic submissions for all types of products, so be sure to save some time at the end to check your electronic submission. And then once you submit it through the gateway, be courteous to your reviewer and send them a note saying, yes, this is being submitted and you should be expecting it. Some submissions don't rush just to get it in, and this one might seem a little counterintuitive, but it is true. Don't allow your subject matter experts to just leave before their section is complete and ready for publishing. Surely, as you're finalizing it, you will find something, either a piece of data or a statement that doesn't work, and you want to reach them and they're on a beach in Hawaii, and that's not particularly useful. And don't send submissions that you know they're deficient. Sometimes, because what's at stake is your reputation with the agency. Once you submit something that's not up to par, it's hard to repair the relationship. Now, there are instances in which we have to send deficient submissions. We kind of know it, and the best thing is acknowledge it, embrace it. Management is on board and has alignment, but also have a plan to start addressing those deficiencies immediately. Don't wait for the FDA to point the deficiencies. Just have the plan, fill in the gaps, and be ready with the data as soon as it's requested by the agency. So don't rush. Be attentive to details. This is critical. Take measured risks and get everyone to agree with the risks. And spoon feed the information. Make sure that your regulator counterpart has an easy job, because you're not the only client that they have. So make sure to make their life easy. That is critical. So some just broader do's and don'ts. So use the FDA's website as a free resource. They provide a lot of training that's guidance specific, submission specific, and also they broadcast their public meetings. So on a certain product or a group of products, they might have a public meeting. Tune into those or listen to the recordings. Those are great. Notified bodies provide training that's specific to medical devices, so use that as well. And then consulting firms like mine, we provide free training, free webinars and newsletters, and those could be useful, especially in the early strategy phase. What I wouldn't do is stake my entire company on regulatory advice you found in a blog or social media, just because what we provide as free advice is very broad. It is intended to serve a broader audience, but not necessarily address a specific issue that you might encounter in your development. And certainly, I've heard this many times, client comes and says, oh, but my sister's friend was working in a company and they think so-and-so. It's free advice and it's worth that much. So don't stake your company on that. Some final thoughts. Look at your regulatory strategy, even though we didn't discuss strategy phase today, but look at your strategy as a value adding asset, and your ultimate validation, regardless of how many people internally or external consultants have looked at your strategy, your ultimate validation is meet with the agency. And so meet with the agency as early as you can, as early as practical. Follow up. All of this is free of charge. They don't have any fees for the meetings. And use a risk-based approach to determine your strategy. Of course, you have to balance regulatory risk with business risks. And so make sure that you use a risk-based approach. Always be following what FDA issues, what standard organizations issue. Look for recalls and warning letters, because those provide good insight of what competitors are up against. And remember that delays cost money, so try not to redo work. Do it right the first time. And don't paint yourself in a corner. So learn how to do it before you start it. And with that, I'm open for some questions, maybe. And remember, we're here for the patients. So regardless of how good we think our product is, at the end, FDA determines how good our product is, but we do it all for our patients. And thank you for your attention, and I'm open for some questions.